Hello, everyone. So I'm a little bit like overwhelmed because I'm not making like a burger platformer with you all right now. Um, but anyway, thanks so much for joining us today and taking the time out to be at this amazing conference. So as Chris made the wonderful introduction, today we're going to be exploring gaming for better health and how we can use games and immersive media to transform healthcare. But before we get into that discussion, we'll just do a couple of introductions. So first, my name is Cassie. I'm going to be the moderator of this discussion. I am the Director of Marketing and Communications at Games for Change. And Games for Change is the largest global nonprofit and community dedicated to using games, both digital, analog, and also immersive media, to help people learn, improve their communities, and just generally make the world a better place. We've been around for 20 years at this point. And during that time, we've grown this really amazing global community that now spreads across 6 continents. And, we've really seen so much evidence over the years that games can make a real meaningful impact on real world problems. But today we're going to be talking about that in regards to healthcare. So we're at a really exciting intersection now with technology and healthcare, particularly in pediatrics. Games and XR aren't just for entertainment. They're really powerful tools for healing and learning and development. And, as I'm sure all of you are very aware of, gaming technology in pediatric healthcare has grown exponentially in recent years. And now we have so many new ways to engage patients and educate healthcare providers and improve outcomes. And this comes in so many forms, from virtual reality therapies to digital games to board games. We're really seeing really diverse applications in pediatric healthcare. And these technologies are really transforming how we approach treatment and education and patient engagement. So today, I have 2 amazing folks here who are working at this intersection of games and pediatric health. So I'm going to turn it over to them to introduce themselves and talk a little bit more about what inspired them to bring gaming and XR into their fields. So we're going to start with Caitlin, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I am Caitlin Niederstadt. I work at the Center for Brain Health, specifically as a clinician for the Charisma Virtual Social Coaching Platform. It's a mouthful. I specialize in working with neurodiverse children and adults, as well as just individuals that have social anxiety, really any kind of social delay or just hardships, right? Ultimately to help them improve their social skills for real world interactions. My master's is in clinical psychology, and that actually leads to why I decided to do any of this, which was because I wanted a different and novel way to connect with my clients, right? One of the things I saw a lot of when working with clients is I would give them a coping tool or some sort of, activity to do outside of session. They never did it. Obviously, right? It's like, oh yeah, take a deep breath before something, and they are not going to do that. So using a virtual reality platform has allowed for more progress to be done.
Amazing. And Michael, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Michael Cosimini. I'm a pediatrician, so I mostly just, take care of kids. I've worked primarily in academic centers, originally at Children's Los Angeles and now at OHSU. I do quite a bit of teaching in that setting. So I teach medical students and pediatric residents, so people that have completed medical school and are doing further training in peds, sort of the large group of people that I work with, as well as, other APP students and people that are in the world practicing, kind of doing education for those. So I'm mostly responsible for educating people in that sort of clinical setting. And I've gotten into games mostly from like a need that I perceived working in that setting, that people are like, they're like little different groups, those different groups, but like pediatric residents are like one of the busiest groups of people that you will know, and they have a lot on their plates, and like they also have like a pretty high standard of quality of education with all the various tools that are out in their world, like multiple choice question banks and like these memory palace tools. There's a ton of great ways to learn as an adult right now, and like giving PowerPoints to these kind of learners is like a pretty weak way to show up. And I find to like get people engaged, I really found games are an excellent way to do that, to keep people engaged, and analog games are a great way to get people talking to each other. So I've had a lot of success implementing both small sort of one-off analog games, and then that sort of spiraled into Empiric, which is a series of card games I've kind of built and distributed in a much larger way than just my own use, where we learn about how to use antibiotics and have mechanics that really reward appropriate antibiotic use for pediatric, in my case, and a lot of other different settings as well.
Amazing. Thanks both for introducing yourself. So now that we've all introduced ourselves and set the stage a bit, so let's dive a little bit deeper. We've mentioned the amazing potential of these technologies, but as we know, nothing really illustrates their impact better than real world applications and talking about that. Obviously, both of you are using gaming in really interesting and different ways. So would thank you for shouting out your game plan cohort. Amazing. I love it. So both of our panelists are integrating gaming into their work in really different and interesting ways. So now we're going to dive into that a little bit more. So Caitlin, I'm going to go back to you for a second. Can you tell us a little bit more about Charisma and how you and your team are currently using it?
Yeah, sure. So Charisma is pretty much a marriage of 2 or 3 different things. So Charisma combines live in the moment strategy-based coaching and a virtual reality platform that works to support individuals with social challenges. So what that means exactly is I play video games and I use the virtual world combined with voice morphing to create realistic, immersive situations for clients to interact in. And then I can, portray different types of personalities, ultimately putting them in tough situations that in the real world, right, might cause, a meltdown or a freeze or just really big emotional responses, right? But doing so in this virtual world allows for safety, right? I can try something new. I can do this in a new way and not feel as scared because I have my coach there. Kind of like I like to think of myself sometimes as like Jiminy Cricket from Pinocchio, just like trying to encourage them to do the right thing or like just like try to see options, right? Because ultimately, when our brains are in a very hijacked state, I'm going to respond out of that as opposed to responding out of like a logical part of my brain, right? I'm like, I've got to leave. I got to get out right now, right? I can pause the interaction and help my clients slow down, see what their options are, regulate in the moment, and then move forward in a way where they're actually successful, right? Our brain learns best when we make mistakes, and the Charisma world combined with the virtual coaching allows for clients to make those mistakes. My population is typically, adults and children. I think my youngest client is 7 right now, and oldest is like 56. But our sweet spot really is between that 5th and 8th grade year when they're in the middle school ages. Yeah, and so the program really provides that safe space. In addition to also, it's fun, right? They are not limited to a therapist office. Instead, they can roam around the world and talk to me and interact with these different types of people that could be scary at some points, but they got a safety net there.
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit more about how you're specifically using it for social growth in neurodiverse children?
Yeah, so with neurodiverse individuals, social looks a lot different, right? Social can be very confusing. Obviously, for a lot of individuals, regardless of diagnosis, social is scary. But sometimes it's a matter, specifically with like in neurodivergent populations, it's like, I am seeing everything around, right? but I don't know what it means or what to make of it, right? And so the charisma world provides a safe space to slow down interactions, right? Using my social cognitive strategies, I can help clients start to shift their focus, right? Helping them with reading the room, right? A lot of the times our clients have trouble with that. I mean, heck, I do too. Right? Just recognizing what's happening around us, right? Responding to others. What are my options? What can I say? What does Mike mean when he says it like this, right? Like, I don't know, right? And I can help them focus in on that, as well as building that social resiliency, right? I can try again. I can practice again. Specifically giving them a new narrative for self, right? I think a lot of the times, majority of my clients have been involved in more social skills programs than I can count, all pretty much like role play based, where they're across the table from a therapist. And what I found is that that's a cognitive load my clients have to carry. Now, as they're across the desk from me and they're saying, yes, this is Mike. Now I'm Mike, right? I'm like a 7-year-old Mike. I am not 7, nor am I Mike. Therefore, that's just a lot of effort, right? Like, it's hard to pretend play in those situations. And so removing that level of load on the client just creates a lot more immersive and experiential learning that ultimately leads to them bridging it into the real world, right? I like to think of charisma as that bridge between, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so interesting because, going back to something that I said earlier, we have seen so often how games are so great for building resilience, not only on like a healthcare level, but just across the board. So seeing these things now being used to actually teach it and for like learn for real outcomes is just so amazing and really exciting to hear. So Michael, gonna hop over to you now, because you're obviously coming at this from a very different angle, from like the analog side of it. So first, if you could tell us a little bit more about Empiric. I know you started to introduce it, but for you, I'm also really interested in the medium of analog with you, and what led you to choose board games as a medium for teaching this.
Sorry, unmuting. I wanted the safety thing you mentioned, I think is really interesting, because that's like, it's the exact same thing actually. Like, when we're teaching with a game, one of the big things we're leaning into is that, like, in the medical setting, like traditionally teaching is thought to be, like kind of potentially like toxic quizzing or like really hierarchical. And I think a game really breaks down that hierarchy in a nice way and resets the expectations that like it's totally cool to be wrong. And it's actually, I think, even easier to play the wrong card. A piece of paper from your hand and set it down on the table is even easier than saying the wrong word. And so I think it really lowers that barrier to participation. It lowers the anxiety, and it like leads to better active learning. And I think that's kind of it's like very different, but it's kind of the same between our two settings. So I just want to say that, like, as I still had what you had in my head. So like going to that, like Empiric is a game that I made because I was teaching in small groups in a very busy, chaotic setting. And we would sort of almost feel like you're stealing time from a number of other responsibilities to teach. And so it's a card game where players will match a hand of 5-ish antibiotics to cases on the table. And it's there are many different antibiotics. I think there's 12 or 13 in this game, but there's many, many more in the real world. And there are many different kinds of infections that people can have. And matching the right antibiotic to the right infection is very difficult, because most of the time you don't know the specific bacteria that's actually infected the patient. A top 3 or 4 that are common for that set of symptoms. Like my ear hurts, it's an ear infection. Yeah, there's 3 very likely ones, and there's a couple other odds and ends, right? So we have to know not just what the diagnosis is, but then what bacteria are likely to cause that. And then it's one step further to say which antibiotics are likely to be a good choice for there. So it's a very difficult subject area. And it's interesting reviewing games that are out in the world. It's a common subject area for people to make games. It seems like people mostly are making games on the things that at least I personally find really difficult, like anatomy, neurology, and antibiotics, for some reason, are like the 3 big world games out in the world. So anyways, Empiric was designed to kind of address that very challenging topic and to address a very challenging teaching situation, which is sort of live amongst patient care. Analog, to get to that question, I mean, I think you just picture yourself like let's picture yourself having a really good analog game experience. Like, what is that like? You picture in your head, okay, I'm at the table with my friends, we're laughing and talking. I might be teasing my friend about a choice they made. They might be excited about like what they're about to accomplish, that plan that they have in their hand. That experience is a very social one. It's a very communication rich kind of setting. So I think like if you want to do that, an analog game is a good one. And if you want to kind of build rapport among a team, playing an analog game is a kind of good way to do that. And I like that. Digital games, I mean, like have a very great sort of thing. Like a good digital game experience for me is like, you know, playing a game that I need like one more turn energy and staying up all night playing a game I'm really excited about and trying over and over and over and over and over and over again and getting better at something through repetition, right? So digital games have like kind of, they have great things to offer, but it's a different vibe. But there's a great study. I think Mary Flanagan is the name of the person who did it. They had a game they made it's a game about infections. They put little cards on the table and they have a pair of kids playing this game, and they can either use treatments or vaccines to prevent the spread of infection. And they play this game on cards on the table, and they also make an iPad version. They randomized dyads of kids to play one or the other of the version, and they found that the card-based version, people played a lot slower. They talked a lot more. And in the digital version, even two kids together in a room playing on a digital one played a lot faster. So like your behavior in those two settings, even with the same set of rules, are going to be very different. And you can kind of pick your goal based on those. Like pick your medium based on your goals. So that's kind of why I think about that's me making stuff up after the fact. I like the analog games, so I make analog games, and then I read about that later to justify my own behavior.
Yeah, I think that it's funny that you say that because yeah, as you both were talking, it's like, yeah, you know, one of you is dealing in the virtual world, one of you is dealing in the real world, but you know, there are these sentiments of meeting people where they're comfortable and places where they feel safe. And I think that's a big reason why a lot of us gravitate toward gaming, whatever form that may be. Is, you know, they give us a place where we can feel like we can fully be ourselves and this like safe space. I know for me that's been true for the majority of my life. So you know, now to see these being used in political settings and educational settings, it's just a real testament to the evolution of games over the past, you know, decade, 20 years ish or so. But you know, we're talking about an analog game and an XR experience. You know, you two are using a medium of games to achieve very different but similar outcomes. And I think that the diversity in these approaches underscores a key point for this whole discussion, which is, you know, there's not really a one size fits all solution in healthcare gaming. You know, different challenges will call for different tools, and you know, that's part of what makes this field really exciting and so full of potential. But you know, let's talk about some of those challenges. So Caitlin, I'm going to go back to you for this one. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced in, you know, integrating these XR solutions in healthcare?
You know, I think the great thing for my clients, right, is that Charisma is virtual, right? And it's a game, right? They're like, oh, this is so fun. It's so cool. It's so epic. I love this, whatever, right? But for my clinicians, right, like, so we, in addition to seeing clients, we are also training outside clinicians to deliver the program, use the platform, etc. And one of the things that we have kind of run into a lot more than I initially would have expected, actually, is just like the comfort level of clinicians playing a video game, right? I think a lot of these clinicians are like, oh, I'm not a gamer, I can't do it, right? And I'm like, well, okay, I'm not a gamer either. My gaming experience has primarily consisted of The Sims or Animal Crossing. So I'm like, you know, it's so interesting to see kind of that response of like, well, I'm not a gamer, you know, I don't know if I could actually do it, blah, 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 you know. And I really think that that has been one of the biggest barriers because, you know, people will get excited about, oh, the potential, you know, this is a virtual world they can do anything in, right? But and then again, it's a virtual world you can do anything in. right? And so it's that fear to try something new, to do something new. I think Michael was saying earlier, just trying something new can be scary, right? Saying something out loud can be scary. And so when you are now delivering a new program and something goes wrong, right? It's, oh my gosh, the world is ending and I am terrified. But that's kind of the like excitement of using a tool like Charisma, is that you are doing something new, you are doing something innovative for both you and your client, right? And that can be scary for you as a clinician, because I'm no longer just sitting here, talking about your feelings. I'm giving you situations and helping you actually work through in an actionable way, instead of talking about something in theory, which can feel very intimidating. I mean, I think when I first started, I was just absolutely like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know. But again, it came within a month, I think. And I was like, oh yeah, I can change avatars. I can morph my voice. I can be in a group conversation with 8 people and I'm all 8. But that was
yeah. Now, Michael, from your perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced on the analog front?
Yeah, to get at that like clinician uptake question, I think it's probably a good angle to talk about for me as well. I've been distributing my game like as a free to print thing, so like anyone can download it and play it. And for a 6-month period of time, we surveyed people downloading them, and largely like people said they're not teaching with games right now because there are not games in the area that I teach. Obviously, cost was a big barrier. And then the third largest barrier might be overlapping here, which is that they were concerned about content accuracy. Like, are games that I'm going to purchase actually be accurate to use for my own teaching? And I can imagine taking up a game to use for your practice would kind of be overlapping with that. So I think, right now it's like I'm sort of on a thing to advocate for people to use more games, because I do think there's pretty good evidence for efficacy. And I think there's more and more, like a lot more, even in the last 2 to 3 years, available for people to use. But I do think, content accuracy concerns is something to think about, and like availability, accessibility is a big thing for people to teach their medical students and residents with games, are some of the big barriers.
Yeah, and just to speak a little bit more to Empiric. So the reason that Games for Change became aware of Empiric was Michael submitted to our Games for Change awards last year. We have the best board game category. And when we were doing our second round of evaluation for our board games, one of our evaluators also went to medical school. And, we're sitting there and we're like, oh man, we really want to make sure that we're giving all of these games like a fair play. And having that voice of somebody with a medical background playing this game, they're like, wow, this would have been so great to have when I was in med school. Like, where were things like this? So it's really interesting, because, this is, like you were saying, Michael, like people still aren't fully aware of how effective games can be for teaching and learning. And, this was such a clear example of that for me, because I would have thought of a card game about antibiotics, like that would be really helpful. But then hearing from somebody who went to med school being like, wow, I wish I had this, more people need to do stuff like this, we were like, this is awesome. And we also had a lot of fun playing it, even though we didn't know what the antibiotics.
I feel like there's an accessibility barrier there for not like you. I always worry about that, sending out to people that don't have medical background. That's like, this is a bunch of nonsense.
No, but it was really great and very easy to pick up. So I think this is a good segue to talk about implementation of things like this. So both of you have talked about, going to clinicians and some folks being overwhelmed, people are intrigued by the potential of gaming and XR, but they might not know where to start. So Caitlin, going back to you, what advice would you give to folks who are interested in integrating more gaming and tech into their practice, their hospital, their programs, but don't know where to start?
I think I was actually talking to my emerging tech director today, Aaron Tate. He's wonderful. And we were just kind of talking about what made Charisma so successful with what it's done so far and where it's going. Specifically, just within, advice for others is just finding your why, right? Like, why are you doing this? What is your whole reason you're even trying to do it, right? For Charisma, it was to create an authentic experience for clients to practice social skills and teaching social skills in this more authentic way, right? They're not putting on a show, they feel more like themselves, right? And ultimately that shaped everything we've done, right? Making things more accessible, making things more immersive, and feeling authentic. And I can show up the way that I want to, and that's okay, right? I think when you are trying to do something like this, doing something new, staying grounded in your why is really going to help just lead you down the path that you want to go down, right? I think obviously there's so many different things coming up, right? So finding your why and staying really rooted in that can be really helpful, I would say.
Yeah, totally. And Michael, from your perspective, what advice would you give folks who want to integrate this more into what they're doing?
I still think largely there's not a lot of stuff you can grab off the shelf and use. I think I really push people when I talk, like when we do like workshops on this or something, I really push people to make something that's very specific to their context, and I think games are probably best made by people who play games. So like, I think if you play a game and say, hey, that set collection mechanic that we did really reminds me of this aspect of my teaching, like trying to find mechanics and games that you play in the real world that really map well onto like one little part of what you do, I think is a really good way to get like started on games. And there's so much you can do with paper and pen and like just writing down like words on note cards. Like that's how all of my games have started, right? You write words on note cards and you play with them. And those can be used in teaching settings. One of the residents brought like a great game conference a couple of weeks ago that they had just made themselves to teach like something very specific, and I had nothing to do with it, so I was so excited to be there. But like, there's a lot of things you can do with pen and paper, mimicking a mechanic from a game you already know how to play, and ideally a game that maybe your learners also know how to play. A lot of people start like making this is just taboo, but with medical terms, or like some of those simple party game mechanics are really easy to port over, and just experiment with something like that first and kind of build up from there.
Yeah. So, this is something that I think is also really exciting about this field, is just how it can bring together like people, very diverse experts from different backgrounds, from game designers to healthcare providers to researchers. And, as time moves forward, obviously, I know everybody here wants to see these things integrated more into what we're doing and how we're doing it. So, Caitlin, how do you see gaming technologies evolving to address growth in neurodiverse individuals and growth in social health in pediatric healthcare?
Yeah. So, I think one of the main areas that I see this benefiting, right, is clients, but also really the clinicians using my platform. This is where I kind of obviously like have direct insights because I'm doing a lot in my sessions, right? I'm morphing my voices, I'm changing my avatars, I'm using my strategies to help coach my clients. Like, there is a lot of cognitive load on the clinician, at least at first, and it gets easier. But ultimately, to help with that, the generative AI and assistive AI is probably the thing that I'm most excited about. Actually, the Charisma program is currently working on 2 patents that will help clinicians to prompt clients, and based on our protocol that we utilize to assess progress, it will then prompt the coach with different types of prompts, like what could you say to your client to help them work on discourse or theory of mind, like perspective taking kind of thing, right? In addition to also auto scoring as we are doing the sessions, right? Because as I'm doing all of these things, I'm also scoring and evaluating, how the client is showing up and such, right? So using these kind of programs, I think it makes it a lot easier to do what I do and make that effective change. And I think with this will ultimately just allow for clinicians to have easier working conditions and help their clients get more, benefit from the programming.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, Michael, you just mentioned how you were at a conference and somebody brought a game that they just created. So what trends are you noticing in analog games and pediatric education? And is there anything in particular that you notice that's gaining traction?
I think there's like a big uptake, like big upswing, both in like surveying the literature, like people publishing about using games for medical education, largely more so than peds specifically, with a lot of growth, really even in the last 10 years with as far as analog, like paper serious games. And in parallel, there's like basically a matching upswing of people publishing games. So there are a lot more games than there were even 5 years ago. And a lot of those, but they're sort of narrowly focused. Like a lot of them are in neurology, anatomy, peds is pretty big, and then emergency medicine. Like there's sort of clusters of people doing this. So there are a lot more games out there. And I think mechanically people are getting more robust. Like we like derisively say like roll move multiple choice question, like roll move MCQ games was like, you read old articles and there's tons of articles like we had the students answer questions and move around a board, and that's our game, which is like cool for engagement and like borderline, just gamification. But now people are doing much more interesting things with matching the mechanics to the learning goals. Behind me, there's a little board. I don't know if you can see over my shoulder. This is called Neuro Navigator, and someone's selling it on Austin Lim is his name. He sells it on Game Crafter, and you like explore the brain. Like you move your pawns around the brain through the sagittal slice or the coronal slices of neuroanatomy to learn the anatomy. And they use cards that say like move ventral versus rostral, medial versus lateral. So you're like learning the language of the movement as well as the relative positions of the anatomy. And people are just doing such more robust, clever things with tabletop than they were a few years ago. So I think that's what's like so exciting right now about watching the space.
Yeah, for sure. And this kind of leads me to my next question is, we are seeing so much growth in the space and so much, cross-sector connection. Caitlin, I'll go back to you. It's just easier to go back and forth.
Sorry, Caitlin.
Anyway, how do there's been all this cross sector stuff, but from your perspective, how do you think that professionals in pediatric healthcare, game development, and XR can collaborate?
Yeah, so I think personally, I've had a very privileged setup here at the Center for Brain Health, and I would say that this is something, if at all possible, is best is having that embedded tech team into the just the entire way across, right? So I have an emerging tech department. I love them. They're wonderful. And being able to actually in real time talk with them, help them develop the next iteration, them actually seeing what I'm doing with the platform and seeing how they can better adjust what's happening to actually fit what I need, right? I think one of the best examples of this was me asking them to create a backpack for the virtual world. Right? We had previously not had one. They're like, Caitlin, why do you need a backpack? I was like, well, okay, duh. Pardon my lack of customization there, but my clients are kids. Of course, somebody is going to hide a backpack in a school, right? Someone is going to lose their backpack and they don't know where it is, right? Somebody has now committed either backpack theft or you're just really forgetful. And it just really creates that level of having them here, right? Being able to discuss with them really just helps to make the game better, make the program better. And they're more responsive, right? If something goes wonky, I can literally message Devin on Teams and be like, hey, so something happened, and they'll help me work it out, right? And that level of support, I think, is just so crucial to creating a game that is actually helpful and gets things done. Oh,
You might be muted.
Oh, jeez. I have one quick follow-up question for that, which is what collaboration has surprised you the most when you've been creating this?
I think that the thing that has surprised me the most when creating this, the collaboration piece, was just my tech team has been there through the entire process, right? And it's only been within the past few years, right, that they actually have gotten to see just the different types of clients I work with, right? Whether they be very low talking, right? Or they're super, super verbose and they're nonstop, just running around and things like that, right? Um, I think the biggest surprise for me was seeing how surprised and excited they were by just like seeing different types of clients I see, right? Like I think it was really cool to see them start thinking about, oh, we're not just making a platform to, just host one-on-one interactions. No, Caitlin is running sessions with like 5 other people and she's playing all the characters, right? She's creating scavenger hunts for them to go on in these environments, right? Like trying to make it more play-based for those that need it. And I think the biggest surprise and actually delight for me was seeing how much they were removed from the process and how bringing them more into that has just created such a better and just like same page feeling for me and the developers. I think they feel more comfortable knowing what's going on, and I feel more comfortable knowing that they know what's going on so they can help better develop the game.
For sure. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, I think it's really, there's like not a ton of, I think, partnerships with analog games. I think a lot of analog games are made by enthusiastic sort of amateurs, and I mean, in the educational setting and probably in the real world setting too, right? There's a lot of DIY and Kickstarter and all that kind of stuff. And I think we're no different in the education space. Like the Venn diagram of people who teach and people who make board games, though, there's like a fair amount of overlap of that, like in the world, probably for reasons I don't totally understand. I would love to see like, professionals that are like game experts get into this. Like, I mean, obviously your VR game is made by people who know how to make VR games. But I think I would love to see those sort of people connecting with us and building those things. I think the gap there is money, because professionals need money to do professional stuff. And I think the few games that do have money behind them are often that's going into art, which is great too. But it would be cool to see a little bit more collaboration.
Yeah. So you're just saying, come collaborate.
Yeah, well, yeah, but unpaid at the moment. But if we can get a grant or something, that'd be cool.
Oh, yes, that's the grant life. We we love that. Well, we're getting close to the end of the session now, but as we start to wrap up, I want to just take a look at the future. So, we've mentioned a handful of times today that, the field is really evolving rapidly and there's been so much going on. So I'm really curious to hear both your perspectives on what's coming next. And Michael, I'm going to start with you this time. So what developments are you most excited about and how do you think that they'll shape the field moving forward?
I think people are still going to be like pouring into print on demand stuff. I think we're going to see educational board games on GameCrafter grow a lot. And I think they're going to be expensive and a little bit inaccessible, but I think they're going to be fascinating. I'm like really hopeful we'll start to see like a couple academic publishers get into the game and have, like games produced at more of the 10,000 copy range as opposed to the, looking at GameCrafter, there were some that have less than 10 copies that are really cool. Then only one up to 1,000 copies. So I'd like to see a couple big hits, which I think is possible. Now that so many more people are making, like they grew up making games or making games, I think we'll see a couple big ones in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one. I mean, just, as I had mentioned earlier at the Games for Change Awards, we introduced a board game award last year, and even just the quality of board games that are being used for healthcare and education or to raise awareness has grown so much even within the past few years. So I'm also hopeful that people will continue to use this and see value in it. And Caitlin, from your perspective, what are you most excited about?
Oh, so many things. I'm excited about a lot. I would say I think that something I'm most excited about is just how the art and the style and the immersion can be improved, right? One of the ways that I've seen it a lot with my own program and just with other programs like mine is just the expansion of the world, right? Creating this open world, like, neutral space where clients really can be creative and immersive and coaches as well, right? Like, having that stage and using different props and different it's like level streaming, I think, but it's really just like a scene setup where I can put a birthday party on, right? Like these are tiny things that have brought me and my clients so much joy. And so seeing how in the newer iterations that we are progressing from, right? So we're in Unreal 4 right now. We're going to be going into Unreal 5 in the future, which is great. I'm so excited about it. We're in the process of creating that. And just seeing the expansion of the world from going from, you know, my coffee shop and a few other places to now I'm going to have a whole community center and houses and a gas station and such, you know, and it's just so cool to see the different possibilities, not only with avatar creation, but also just world creation. And so I'm excited for that. In addition to also just like being able to access it via a web browser. I don't think I mentioned that earlier. We can actually access all of this through Amazon Web Services, right? So on a Google Chrome, basically equivalent of a Zoom call, you just click a button and then boom, you have the game in front of you. It's streaming. You're able to do everything that you need to do. So I think expansions within those systems, I'm just absolutely over the moon for.
Yeah, all of that stuff is really, really exciting. And yes, Marty, Unreal Engine is a great engine.